How do we earn a living? I mean, it's a question every single one of us has to face. But sometimes that question carries the weight of the entire world. We're going to explore that today, looking at everything from the man who built the atomic bomb to an engineer just trying to figure out their career. It's a really profound ethical journey. So let's start with maybe the most high-stakes professional dilemma in all of human history, the story of the physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. Just imagine that moment. Oppenheimer is watching the first ever atomic detonation, and this is the line that comes into his head. It's from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. It's just so chilling, and it perfectly captures this terrifying power that humanity had just unlocked. And, the huge burden he would end up carrying for the rest of his life. To really get his internal conflict, you have to understand why he did it in the first place. Oppenheimer didn't just see the Manhattan Project as some cool science experiment. No, for him, it was a moral mission. He truly believed that stopping fascism was absolutely essential to save Western civilization as he knew it. And this really captures the two sides of his story perfectly. On one hand, you've got this national hero, the guy who's celebrated for helping end the war. But on the other hand, you have a man who was literally haunted by what he created. He would tell people he had blood on his hands. This deep, deep conflict would define the rest of his life. But here's where his regret gets really nuanced, and this is key. He actually felt the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were justified to prevent an even greater loss of life in a ground invasion. His real guilt, the thing that kept him up at night, wasn't about World War II. It was about the terrifying nuclear arms race that he knew he had started. That's why he fought so hard against the even more powerful hydrogen bomb and spent his later years digging into ancient philosophy, looking for answers. Okay, so let's take that massive world-changing dilemma and bring it down to a scale that might feel a lot closer to home for many of us. You might be thinking, okay, that's a wild story, but what does a physicist's regret from 1945 have to do with my job today? Well, the scale is obviously different, but the core ethical question, it's exactly the same. So let's look at the story of a modern aerospace engineer. Super successful, great career, 13 years in, and then they just quit. Why? Because they felt this profound sense of emptiness, this total disenchantment with their life's work. You see, from day one, this engineer was standing at an ethical crossroads. The skills they had in rocket science could be used for incredible things like space exploration, or they could be used to build high-grade weapons. That same satellite tech could connect the entire globe, or it could be used for government spy networks. Their knowledge was always dual use, and that presented a constant choice. So they made a choice. They decided to avoid the defense industry and go into civil aviation. But even there, that feeling of being complicit just grew and grew. They felt like they were contributing to CO2 emissions, and they were working for a company that still had a military division and was wrapped up in these huge bribery scandals. The ethical minds were just so blurry, and the work felt completely out of sync with their values. So where do we even get the language to talk about these feelings, this professional guilt, this disenchantments? Well, for that, we can actually look to a framework that's about 2,500 years old. This is the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. It's basically a practical guide for how to end suffering in our lives. It covers everything, our mindset, our speech, our actions, you name it. But for our purposes today, we're going to zero in on that fifth step, the one highlighted right there, right livelihood. So what does that actually mean? Well, according to the ancient texts, it's pretty straightforward. It's about abandoning a dishonest way of making a living and pursuing an honest one instead. Simple enough, right? But what exactly is considered dishonest? Well, the teachings get super specific about this. They actually outline 5 types of business that a follower should try to avoid. So here they are, the big 5 things to avoid. Business in weapons, business in human beings, which you could think of as trafficking, business in meat, business in intoxicants, and business in poison. Each one is seen as something that directly causes suffering in the world. And this is what's so incredible, right? You see how timeless this wisdom is. Business and weapons, I mean, that's the exact dilemma that Oppenheimer and our engineer faced. And business and poison, you can easily see how that applies to work that causes massive environmental damage. This ancient framework is speaking directly to our modern world. So of course, this framework kind of forces us to turn the lens back on ourselves and the choices that we're making in our own careers. And let's be honest,
This is complicated. In our super interconnected global economy where companies have these crazy complex supply chains and different divisions, can anyone's job be perfectly pure? I mean, the engineer discovered that even their company's choice of contractors had ethical problems. It really raises a tough question. Where does our personal responsibility actually start and where does it end?
The modern Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh put it so perfectly. He said, "Our work can either be an expression of our deepest self, or it can be a source of suffering. And that choice, well, it has huge consequences for our own peace of mind." And that's what it all comes down to, right? This is the final question for each of us. It's not about finding some perfect, pure answer. It's about being awake, being mindful of the consequences of how we choose to earn our living. Will your work align with the person you truly want to be? Or will it slowly, maybe without you even noticing, pull you further away from that person?